Hello, everyone. We are live and ready to get started. You're actually going to hear a couple of different voices today. You'll hear from Jarl Crocker, our Director of Training and Technical Assistance, to get us started off at the beginning. And then to lead us through the standards, you'll hear from Natalie Kramer, who is a Program Support Specialist here at the Partnership, who will be actually leading us through the individual standards. So you'll hear a couple of different voices, but either way, talk to us, let us know any kind of questions that come in. So with that, Jarl, if you're ready to take it away.
Sure, and thank you so much, Cashin, and thanks to everybody for joining us here this afternoon. As Cashin said, what I want to do is start us off with just a quick overview of the agenda, then talk a little bit about how the Technical Assistance Guide is organized, give you some tips for how to use it, and then turn it over to Natalie to talk about the content. So just to begin with a quick overview of the agenda, we'll talk a little bit about how the guide is organized, again, talk through at least some suggestions about how you might want to organize the actual review process to assess your agency against the standards. And then Natalie will talk about standards 1.1 through 1.3, and we'll wrap up with any questions we didn't get to during the presentation. All right, so quick overview of how the Technical Assistance Guide is structured and the two primary purposes that we're hoping agencies use it for. So the first purpose is to assist agencies with the definition, intent, and documentation of the standards. So what you'll see in every standard is a Section A and a Section B. In Section A, we provide a little bit more background information about the standards, define any technical terms, provide you with any additional content about the activities related to the standard itself, and then talk a little bit about why it was included in the overall list of standards, because we think it's important for the network to know why the standards were selected. Then in Section B, we provide some basic guidance over common questions we've got over interpretation of the standards. So we pose a couple of different possibilities explaining how an agency wouldn't meet the standards under particular situations, just to make sure that folks are thinking through the interpretation of the standards, and also we include suggested documentation, although with the caveat that it's ultimately up to the state office to determine what documentation is required to provide to them. And of course, all agencies should reach out to the state office as early as possible for any additional guidance on the interpretation of the standards. Now, the second objective for the Technical Assistance Guide is that it's intended as a capacity building resource, and that's what Section C and D are applied to. So what we suggest is that as agencies go through the standards, they take a little bit of extra time just to do a very quick evaluation, not just of whether they're meeting the standard, but how well they're meeting the standard. And this can just be a very short discussion by the staff who are actually doing the review. But that Section C provides some basic diagnostic questions to help with that discussion. Section D provides additional resources, so links to manuals, how-to guides, best practices, case studies that the staff can use to compare how their agency operates with other agencies in the network, best practices, and other basic guidelines for good operations. At the back of every Technical Assistance Guide, we include a Likert scale that you can rate where your agency is on a 1 through 5. And again, we're encouraging the staff as they go through the review process to assess the standards to go ahead and rate where you think your agency is, and then provide just a little bit of basic feedback to management about how the agency might improve. So maybe note any strengths that the agency has, but also hopefully identify some opportunities for improvement. So that way the process of going through the standards isn't simply about compliance, it's about using it as an opportunity to build the overall capacity of the organization. So that's the big picture overview of how the guides are organized, and now I just want to walk through a couple of quick process suggestions for how agencies might come at the review process. So a couple of quick diagnostic questions. We provide these in the beginning of the technical assistance guide along with some other general guidance about how an agency might want to actually organize the mechanics of going through that assessment process. So the first question we suggest agencies ask is, how is the review connected to processes to document other standards? So we're assuming that many agencies will probably have multiple staff working on different categories. That makes sense that your HR people would do the HR category, your data people would do the data category. So we just want to make sure that agencies are being intentional about how the teams going through those different categories are talking to each other and working together. Secondly, ask, are there opportunities to connect the review into existing agency processes? So making sure that agencies are looking for opportunities to work in the evaluation of standards. So if you're doing a strategic planning process, that's obviously a great time to go move ahead and make sure that you've met all the standards related to strategic planning. By the same token, if your agency has a customer improvement committee or some other quality improvement process, just integrating the routine collection of data for standards about Category 1 would be a great way to just collect that data more efficiently and make sure that it's already there when you go through that ultimate review process. A third question to ask is who should participate. So again, we suggest that agencies think about having teams of 2 or 3 staff actually go through the review to see if the agency is in compliance with the standards. That gives you an extra set of eyes. It also helps share the work, and it's a great opportunity, again, to build staff capacity. So to review and ask those basic questions about the management and operations of the agency, the standards raised. And also having a couple of folks at the table also helps that assessment and evaluation process that we're suggesting that agencies go through. Another question to ask is how will staff determine if the standards are met? So it's important to make sure staff are on the same page around guidance about what counts as meeting the standards. So that means making sure they've reviewed all guidance from the state office around what documentation is necessary. It probably helps to have met as a team at least once just to make sure that everybody understands what that process is like. We also suggest that agencies ask how staff will document compliance, so making sure those different teams are uploading the documents in a similar fashion if you're uploading to a central server or to the state office. If you're organizing it in a filing cabinet or some other physical system, making sure that everybody knows how to label and code the information. Also, make sure to ask how the staff will manage recommendations. And so again, we're suggesting staff, again, take, even if it's only 30 minutes or so, to go through those diagnostic questions in Section C, ask how your agency is performing, and then provide some basic recommendations to the executives and potentially the board. So just making sure there's a process in place to follow up on those recommendations. And then lastly, agencies need to ask how they're going to archive results, because obviously this is going to be a yearly activity. So making sure there's a, just a brief 2 or 3 page log about how the agency went through the process this year, documenting procedures, noting any lessons learned, and providing suggestions for how it can be done more efficiently the next time. And again, nothing too complicated, but again, since it's going to be a yearly activity, making sure that you leave a record for the folks who do it the next year, because it might not always be the same staff. Great, and then suggestions. Cash, if I could get the next, we'll turn it on over to Natalie to talk through, but again, the slide provides the overview of all the standards that are related to Category 1. So Natalie, if you want to touch on how those other standards are connected, and then take it away.
Sure, thanks, Charles. Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to put these standards up there just to remind everybody what standards are related to this category and making your review process run more efficiently. You may want to think about these other standards, reviewing them together. They may have some of the same documentation, involve some of the same staff. So just wanted to offer this list so that you could coordinate your review process with these standards with those of Category 1, really to make that process more efficient and save time for other activities. So with that, we're going to jump into Category 1. So standard 1.1 is the organization demonstrates low-income individuals' participation in its activities. So Jarl walks through the different sections that the TA guide follows. So we're going to start with section A, which is guidance on definition and intent of the standard. And again, as Jarl mentioned, this is really trying to get at where the standard came from, why it's important for community action in our network, and also the intention of what it's really meant to do in order to build our capacity and increase the impact of our network. So with regards to standard 1.1, I really think that the intention here is twofold. The first is really for the betterment of our agency. IM 82 really talks about including the voice of low-income people for the board with the role of governance, planning, and assessment. So those who really understand poverty and their community, especially its needs and its resources, are really available and have a voice at the table. So that's the first reason for the inclusion of this standard. And the second is really to build the social capital of our low-income neighbors. So it goes back to the ACT and maximum feasible participation. I included a quote directly from the ACT here on the slide that really gets at this idea of low-income people owning a stake in their community, which is one of the national goals, and really allowing them to be involved in this process, involved in agency activities, and through those activities to really build their social capital, to build their network, and really be empowered to address the roots of poverty that are taking place in their community. With regards to section B, which is on compliance and documentation, this is the key part for everybody. We really walk through different pieces of compliance, any sort of challenges that may come up, and then different ideas for how to document this standard. So I did want to start by saying that, of course, the review team should start by looking to the state for any state requirements in general for nonprofits, and then also with your state lead agency for what monitoring tools that they're going to be using and anything specific that they're looking for with regards to this standard. And thinking through some of the challenges that may arise through the monitoring or that may vary by state, we came up with a couple challenges and specific things for organizations to think through as they're reviewing these standards. The first one for standard 1.1 is really that this is not about serving clients, serving low-income people that walk into your door, but involving those low-income people in organizational processes. So involving them in the development of services, through your needs assessment process, maybe to help you plan fundraising events or other community events that you have, or having low-income people serve on your advisory body or your advisory boards. The second challenge to think about is with regard to the tripartite board. It is allowable to have representatives of low-income people serving on the board. An easy way to meet the letter of this standard is to sort of count those low-income people that serve on the board. But the point of clarification is here, if you use representatives instead of those actual low-income people, then you wouldn't be able to count that in meeting the standard. So you would have to use low-income volunteers, or if low-income people were serving on advisory bodies or some other committees, you could count that, but not representatives of the board. You couldn't count low-income people if they were actually directly serving on the board, but not their representatives. So that's a sort of a tricky one that we wanted to make sure to note. But again, the idea is really to have that ongoing participation and involvement in activities. The letter of the standard would be met by low-income people on the board, but the idea is for that sort of ongoing activity, which gets that third challenge. This is really looking for going beyond that sort of one-time event volunteer. If you have volunteers at a fundraising event or another community event that you have, that may meet the letter of the standard, but it's really meant to go beyond that. So if they help plan the event, if they volunteer on a long-term basis, especially if it's current and it's recent, so maybe they didn't help you with an event 3 years ago, but really trying to be current and make sure that low-income people are continuously and regularly involved in agency activities. They're involved in the planning and the really integral pieces of the events, of the programs, of the evaluation efforts of your agency, and not just volunteering for an hour or two at an event that you hold in the community. So there are a number of ways to document meeting this standard. And these are just the partnership and the organizational standards Center of Excellence ideas. Again, your state may have different ideas on these, but we just wanted to include some in the guide to get people thinking about different ways that they may document this standard. The first bullet really points to the idea of showing the low-income people directly serve on your board, so those documentations could prove that point. The second one really delves into the recruitment strategy for including low-income people, whether that be on your board, as volunteers, or on advisory bodies. So really documenting your strategy and your recruitment methods for including low-income people in that way. The third bullet shows participation from those that may be outside of board activities. That would be your advisory body or any other committee meetings, showing those minutes as proof. And the fourth really gets to those volunteer efforts. There's another standard that specifically relates to volunteering, but you could use those documents as well to prove that low-income people participated in your activity through volunteer efforts. So Jarl touched on this a little bit, but this section 3 in the TA guide is really, we called it beyond compliance, and it really is going above and beyond. This would not be a part of your monitoring visit. It is not required. This is really about building organizational capacity, aiming for best practices, and really trying to move beyond compliance. So I did want to make that disclaimer before we get into this discussion that the things that we're going to talk about here are not part of compliance with the organizational standards. What it really is about is looking at your organizational processes and the systems that you have in place to really evaluate whether you're doing things the best way that you could be. It's about looking to other community organizations, trying to identify best practices in nonprofits, in community-based organizations, and maybe in faith-based organizations that have processes and serve similar clients as to yourself, but may have some best practices that you can utilize for your services. So we offer a couple of questions that can really help you think through this review process and thinking about how to move beyond compliance. So the first is really talking about a strategy for low-income board recruitment. So it is a requirement to have low-income people or their representatives on your board, but really thinking about whether you have a strategy for that or you're simply filling the seats when they arise. Really thinking through that process, making sure you're really working your service area to figure out what local people, what people in your geographic service area who are low income could have, could offer and could be at the table to sort of represent their community in that way. And then really evaluating your methods, your recruitment methods. How do you get to people? How do you orient them? How do you talk about what they would do when they're on the board? So really thinking through the process that you utilize to integrate low-income people onto board service, and the best way to do that would really help build your capacity and move you beyond compliance in that way. The second piece is really about directly engaging low-income people in the community to encourage their participation. So this is about going to community events, networking with people in the community that you serve in, really building those relationships. It's also about having multiple methods of advertising, so trying to get to low-income people in different ways. It's a diverse population, and really having multiple methods, whether that be online or paper flyers or through social media, really just to get the word out about the opportunities that your organization offers and trying to reach a large population. And again, really the goal is for year-round sort of long-term engagement. So having multiple methods will help you to achieve that goal as well. A couple other questions for moving beyond compliance. This one's really about leveraging the current programs and the customers that you have, really about working efficiently. So looking maybe if you have a Head Start site, looking to your Head Start parents to involve them further in organizational activities, maybe hosting focus groups with the people that you already work with to get some more advice on how to engage low-income people. Recruiting people that you serve or partners that you have in the community who also engage low-income people to serve on advisory boards or committees, to serve as volunteer, to help plan those community events that you have. So really engaging the people that you're already working with to become more involved in agency activities. And the last one is really about offering capacity building opportunities to low-income individuals. So again, this is about self-sufficiency and empowerment. It's about helping low-income people build their social capital by offering them opportunities to build relationships, to network, and also to really gain experiences and skills. So this could look like offering opportunities for low-income community members to attend trainings that you offer, or trainings that you know are happening because of your community partners or just others in your geographic service area. It could be allowing low-income people who serve on committees or that you see have potential to lead to really facilitate meetings or maybe take a bigger role in your community assessment process, to attend those meetings with community stakeholders, again, just to really help them build their network, their experience, and their skills. So the other piece that is in about the Beyond Compliance section is resources. So I put a couple of screenshots here that are probably extremely small, but we do link to 3 resources with regards to the standard. The first is a checklist from CAP-Law. It's a couple years old, but we think it's still really valuable to really think through your board recruitment process, and that's available on their website and on the CSBG TNTA Resource Center, and it's linked here as well. The second is also from CAP-Law, and it's a board composition matrix. So this is an Excel document that's color-coded. That really helps you keep track of who's represented on your board, so you can really strategize your low-income involvement in that way. The third is from ICAP, who was our 2012 Award for Excellence winner, and because of their award, they wrote a toolkit really about their best practices, and they specifically have what I think are really innovative ways of including low-income individuals. So I think there's a screenshot at the bottom of the slide there that's a paragraph from their toolkit that really talks about how they do that. And again, this toolkit is available on our website on this slide and in the Resource Center as well. So before we move on to Standard 1.2, I wanted to pause and see if there were any questions about Standard 1.1 or anything that we've talked about thus far.
Sure, it does look like there's one that's come in here. It's partially comment, partially question, but has there been any thought given to what defines low income? Is it a hard and fast rule of like 100 or 125% of the poverty line? So that's part one of it, and the standard doesn't absolutely suggest that only customers could be considered low income, so that's kind of that second piece of it. Jarl, did you want to start, or Natalie? Either one.
Natalie, I can start. I mean, obviously, I think low income implies, wherever the federal poverty line is. But one of the things we suggest with the needs assessment is agencies look at different definitions of poverty, because there are some that sort of peg it much more or sort of less conservatively than the Fed does. But otherwise, I think just defining low income as at the federal poverty line or below is probably the intent of the standard.
Right, and as noted, it doesn't specifically say it because there are different rules even within the states in the CSBG. Some use that 100, some allow 125, some allow for particular programs to go up to 150. There's a few that actually look at livable wages and cost of living, so that is why it is purposely not called out, but probably thinking about how you define it in other places is probably the way to go. And note that it does say low-income people, so they could be customers or not.
Yeah, I think that last point is really key to really think about your geographic service area, those that you're serving right now and those that you could be serving, those that could be involved in the process. So it definitely relates to the customers that you're serving and those who are low-income living in the community. The other piece about the poverty level would sort of be the tough answer of really talking to your state to figure out what their definition of that would be. It's true that it's not definitely defined within the standard and that each program is different. So I would really check with the state, but I would say, just from my opinion, it would probably be with the 125%, which I think is the CSBG line.
Great. We have another couple of questions that are kind of related, so I'm going to group them. If for some reason we don't cover a particular nuance in your question, feel free to let me know, and we will re-ask. But grouping together here, is there anything that you would have to do to require that your board members give proof of their income, and then we have similar questions like, do we take their word of mouth on that? And I would say that if the board and only the board is what you're using to document this standard, then I would say yes, you're actually starting to look at that kind of proof of income there. Theoretically, you will be looking at some of those other pieces. You've got those advisory bodies we talked about, the volunteer activities, some of those other events that would supplement it that would prevent you from having to do that somewhat awkward conversation of actually asking for some sort of proof of income.
Right, and the other thing you can do is, certainly put it in your bylaws, and when you're recruiting board members, just be clear about the tripartite structure and how your agency defines low income, because there might be, other opportunities for service for folks, even if they wouldn't, qualify as low income. But I think, just making it clear as possible leaves it up to the folks if they want to follow up about, does my income really count? Then you can deal with them on a case-by-case basis.
Great, and we do have several people that are coming in from all different states. We've got a 200%, 175, depends on the programs, 125, so that is why a hard and fast line across the entire CSBG network was not done. All right then, I think that gets all of the questions that we have for now, and of course you can always put those into the chat window as we go, and we will pause again after 1.2.
Great, thanks so much for the questions. So getting into standard 1.2, it reads, the organization analyzes information collected directly from low-income individuals as part of the community assessment. So looking at the first piece really about why the standard is included and what the intention is here, takes us back to maximum feasible participation and the CSBG Act. Really thinking about the fact that communities and also the needs of communities and the people in those communities change. So really figuring out who is there and what do they think the biggest needs are is really the intention of this standard. The Roma curriculum really talks about who is your customer, the idea that your customer is constantly changing. So really including the low-income voice in what the needs and the resources are in their personal community really makes for a much more meaningful assessment. So that's really what the standard, why it was included. So talking directly to low-income people really helps figure out both the level of the need and what piece of that need they value the most, which is really what this graphic is getting at. So figuring out what the need is, whose need is it, really defining it out by that level, and then once you figure out what level the need is, and probably as a part of those discussions, you're really uncovering what it is that your client or your customer really values, which will help you plan accordingly. So we, in Community Action, do know a lot about poverty, but the integration of what those living in poverty really think about poverty is invaluable. So to really make the community needs assessment comprehensive, we really need to go directly to those people. So this standard really ensures that that takes place. Roma is about assessment, planning, and evaluation constantly, which is why it's a cycle. I'm sure that you all have that posted up in your office. But it really requires that we're consistently reevaluating the need from the low-income people, because then it will help us guide our planning efforts and figure out what we're evaluating our success against. So if we don't know what our starting point is, what need we're trying to fill, it becomes harder to evaluate whether we've met that need or not. And thirdly on this slide is the alignment with the goals and strategy of Community Action as a network. Really pointing to those national goals that having low-income people as a part of the assessment and the planning process really gives them a stake in the success of their community. Having them participate in addressing those conditions of poverty really helps them participate in really changing their community. And thirdly, it helps really build their social capital so that they can become more self-sufficient. Moving into compliance and documentation with this standard, I will say again to start by talking to your state as evidenced by defining low income and those in poverty, really figuring out what level that will be in your community is key. And also because this standard relates so much to Category 3, which is about needs assessment, You may want to look at the monitoring sort of templates or what's being monitored with regards to your needs assessment so that this standard and your documentation and compliance with the standard really fits into that process as well. In thinking about some challenges that you might face with this standard, we did want to note that while nonprofits, businesses, stakeholders, and really community organizations work with low-income people and should be included in your needs assessment process, this standard is really about talking to low-income people directly. So again, those others should be included in the process, but for this standard, it's really about direct contact with low-income people, really about those who are living in poverty, what their view is on the needs and the resources available. The second is really getting at the idea that communities change and that the requirement is for a needs assessment every 3 years. So you really want to figure out, someone brought up the point earlier about customers and non-customers, you really want to figure out what you're already helping people do and thinking about those people who you haven't reached yet, maybe because you're not particularly providing a service that they need. So you would do this through your forums, your focus groups, your surveys to really get at the larger low-income community outside of those current customers and maybe even the past customers that you have. So make sure that that is really a part of this standard. And the third, again, the idea that this is every 3 years. So really not just using the data that you collected during your last needs assessment, that you would need to do those focus groups and surveys for each needs assessment because the community's changed, because there are likely new people living there, or maybe their needs have changed over the last 3 years, that it's really key for this standard to talk to those people for each needs assessment that you do. Moving into documentation for this standard, there are really 3 parts of the standard that I wanted to pull out specifically. The first is really questioning whether you talk directly to low-income people. So there are a couple examples here. You could include transcripts or notes from those conversations or focus groups or events that you held. You could point to the methodology section if you include one in your needs assessment report that really talks about this is how we found or this is how we talked to or gathered low-income people to get their feedback. The second is really about whether this was specifically for the purposes of a needs assessment. Again, you could point to that methodology section of your report. You can include notes from your focus groups or your town halls, and you could have a date on all of those things. So because we're on the 3-year cycle, and I know that some states have are utilizing different years for that, but really having dates on all of this to prove that this is part of the needs assessment that you're doing currently would be helpful for the standard as well. And then third is really about analysis. So did you analyze what all of these low-income people said, or did you just sort of staple the notes from those meetings or the surveys onto the back of your report? So a couple options for this are the key findings section, which is required in another standard, which really serves to sum up your whole assessment in your report and what people said, so you could point to that to really get at the analysis of what you found. Another option for this is minutes, whether that's with your needs assessment committee or your staff team or a committee of the board, or maybe the analysis happened at the board level. Having minutes to sort of back up that that conversation happened, that there was analysis of this data, could be used for documentation for the standard as well. So again, just wanted to throw out the disclaimer that here we're moving beyond compliance. This is not part of monitoring. This is not part of meeting the standard. This is about building capacity and really figuring out how you can improve as an agency as a whole. So some questions to think about in doing that are, firstly, really thinking about whether you routinely collect data from your customers and non-customers. So thinking about in those off years, because of the 3-year cycle or maybe the 2-year cycle that you're on, do you think about all of this? Are you talking to people? Are you assessing whether the need still stands? Are you reevaluating what you thought the need was and whether your programs are really matching that? And it really is about building relationships and also about building your reputation in the community, which moves us into our next question, which is about thinking whether you use data collection as a way to engage community members. So really building your organization network and your brand, getting your name out there, really raising awareness about what you do, what the state of poverty is, and how you're addressing it, and also identifying volunteers. So this is really an opportunity to engage with your community through the needs assessment process, to really put your name out there, to let people know what services you offer, and to really see your organization as a safe space in the community for people to turn to that's making real change. The third piece to think about is updating your assessment. Again, it's a 3-year cycle, but really doing mini assessments in that, whether that means sort of querying your advisory board, your volunteers, or any committees that you have, just to make sure that you're still moving in the right direction, you're still addressing the right things, other issues haven't come up, maybe there's changing population or changing employment status at the local level or even the federal level, and you may need to change things within those 3 years. So really updating that in the off time will really help with sort of that idea of continuous assessment and the Roma cycle to really keep that going in the off years. I did want to highlight some resources that relate to this standard. NASCAS did a guide on community needs assessment that really wonderfully walks through the process of completing an assessment, and they have good templates that can be used to meet this standard to really get that feedback from low-income people. The second is from Texas. They created a community needs assessment guide that they sent to us and we thought was wonderful and wanted to share it with everybody. And they have a template on surveys, and that is what is included up here on the slide. And the third is from the Missouri Association. They also did a toolkit on needs assessment that walks through really advice on how to do this, and they offer some templates as well. So with that, I will pause and see if there are any questions regarding Standard 1.2.
Looks like we were crystal clear on 1.2. I don't see any questions that have come in, but again, this is not your last opportunity. We will pause again once we finish up with 1.3, so be sure to get those in at any point through that Q&A box.
I will say before we move on to that, this does relate very clearly to needs assessment. We did a similar webinar to this and do have a TA guide on needs assessment. So really going back to that first idea of all the related standards, these do tie together, and to make your review process more efficient, you could slide this standard into your review of the Category 3 standards and utilize the similar resources there as well. All right, so Standard 1.3, the last standard. We're really taking it home here today. So the organization has a systematic approach for collecting, analyzing, and reporting customer satisfaction data to the governing board. So first, looking at the definition and intent of the standard, I wanted to start with the Roma Framework, really the idea that this is just good business practice to know your customer, to know what they care about so you can make changes accordingly. You and your staff probably have ideas for improvement, whether that be at the organizational level or the program level, but this is really about going straight to the source, to your customer, to figure out what it is that they care about and what they might like changed. Secondly, I wanted to bring up IM 82 again, which really talks about the board's involvement in development, planning, and evaluation, and providing them with this customer satisfaction information really gives them what they need to be able to develop, plan, and evaluate organizational programs accordingly. And it also really makes sure that the low-income voice is present throughout that whole Roma cycle that the board takes part in. Again, it's about maximum feasible participation. That's really at the core of this entire category. Really low-income people owning a stake in their community. It really gives them an opportunity to voice how changes are made in their community, and as well as how they and their neighbors are treated throughout that process. It ensures that a successful business practice is utilized. So going back to Drucker from the Roma curriculum, really thinking about knowing your customers, what they value, and in order to measure whether we've been successful or not and really improve our outcomes, we really need this information collected and analyzed. So that customer satisfaction system is really what's vital. So moving into compliance and documentation, check with the state regarding the specific timing requirements for them for this standard. So if you maybe collect your data on a yearly basis, whether that matches up with when they're monitoring, you really want to be clear about when that would be so that you have everything that you need. They may have specific requirements on formatting for the analysis or the collection of this data as well. So wanted to make sure to remind everybody to just really check in on that for this standard. With regards to challenges to this standard, I wanted to remind everybody that this data needs to be analyzed. Really having that collection system and collecting the data in place is not enough. You really need to make it meaningful for the use of the board in planning and evaluation. Secondly, you have to share it with your board. So the board members are likely not a part of the collection process, so really finishing up that feedback loop by providing them with analysis of the data so that they can use it is what the standard is all about. And then thirdly, it really has to be clear that you have a strategy, that you're not just collecting customer satisfaction data for purposes of an assessment or maybe even for a grant application, but that there's a system in place for regular collection and analysis is a key piece of this standard as well. With regards to how you would document that, there are three pieces to look for here. The first is showing that you have a strategy or system in place. So this could look like a customer satisfaction policy. This may outline the timing that I talked about before, the staff that's involved in this process, what the analysis might look like, and your process for reporting it. And the flip side of that may also be a schedule. So the dates for when you're going to send out maybe customer satisfaction surveys, when you're hoping to get those back, how much time you're going to allot for analysis, and then when that would need to be presented to the board. So that's sort of one option for showing that you have a strategy in place. Secondly is really showing that it was collected and that it was analyzed. So the first is that you could show your data collection instrument. So whether you send out a survey or a postcard or there's a form, or maybe it's on SurveyMonkey at an iPad as people walk out, whatever it is that you do to collect that data, having that as proof that you collected it would be useful for this standard. And then the second piece about analysis, if you put your analysis in a report that you're sharing with your board or with your community, that report could serve to show that you analyzed the data versus just having the raw surveys attached to something. And the third piece about reporting it to the governing board, you could use minutes here for when that report was shared with the board or when a staff member did a presentation to the board, really with that date included in the minutes that actually occurred. So lastly, moving beyond compliance, again, this is outside of monitoring and about building capacity. They're about some best practices that we've seen and found among other nonprofits and some community action agencies that we wanted to highlight. So the first question to think about would really be whether you have a committee who's really devoted to strategizing and making changes based on this feedback. So they could be the ones that work on the policy that I've talked about before, that go through the methodology, et cetera. They could be the ones that outline what it is the board is expected to do upon receiving the data. So they receive this report and then figuring out really what the time expectation for them is to sort of think this over and what their process will be for making changes. Secondly, really reviewing whether you have multiple approaches for customers to offer feedback and really making it accessible. So think about how you collect the data that you do and whether it excludes any clients. So think about whether the sort of the mediums that you offer, whether it's online or in paper, whether it's in mail or email, and really offering a safe space for people to provide feedback. So this question for review is really thinking about your process and your methodology to get that customer satisfaction data in an accessible way. And thirdly, really thinking through your integration process, the sort of now what of your customer satisfaction data. So maybe you sort it by time frame and program really to get a more detailed view of what customers are saying based on the decisions that were recently made in your organization or based on the specific program that's run by certain people, really to dig deeper into what the issues may be or what good things are happening that are getting such high customer satisfaction reviews so that you can replicate them elsewhere. Another piece about this would be really just increasing the conversation that you have with leadership and with the board. So maybe offering a quarterly report on customer satisfaction data could really move you into that best practice category because that would make it more likely to really be included in your programming decisions of the board. And then thirdly is really just making the connections between what customers said they felt about programs, what their outcomes were, so connecting the customer satisfaction data with the client outcomes, and then also with your strategic plan, how you've made changes based on what the customer satisfaction data was and how customers were doing in those programs that they were reporting on. So really connecting the dots between all these processes that you have in place to plan and evaluate and assess accordingly. There are a couple of resources with this standard that I did want to point out. CapsFlow in California has a wonderful website with TA resources specifically for each category of the standards, and they had a couple templates for this standard specifically regarding customer satisfaction. So there's a screenshot here on the slide of a postcard that they utilized for customer satisfaction. The second is from the ICAP toolkit that I mentioned earlier. When they won the Award of Excellence, they provided some best practices, and the screenshot here is an example of a board action that they wrote out that could be used as a template for others, as well as really thinking through what a board policy for customer satisfaction data could look like. And the third is a Compass Point article from a couple years ago that I thought it was helpful in really thinking about defining your customer and really going beyond the conventional definition of a customer to do that 360 evaluation. So that would really be moving into the beyond compliance piece of the standard, but we wanted to include it in case it would be a helpful reference for people. So with that, I will pause for questions, and on the screen here is our Organizational Standards Team, Center of Excellence team that can answer any further questions about this category, any of the other categories of the standards, as well as specifically to the TA guides. Do we have any questions, Cashin?
It does not look like we have any at the moment. I will talk slowly in my sign off here in case there are any last ones. First up, to make sure that you guys don't let this be the end of the conversation. You have our contacts up here on the screen now, as well as making sure that you are talking to your state office to see any particulars. I think we probably hammered that home pretty well throughout, as well as your state associations, which may have additional toolkits, templates. They may be able to hook you up with somebody, a neighbor of yours, to maybe do some peer sharing in that way. So make sure that you are, in fact, talking to us at the national level as well as your state contacts. This particular TAA guide is not posted as of the live event, but if you're catching this onto the recording, it will be, because the plan is to get it posted this afternoon. So be on the lookout for that, as well as the recording and slides will be available tomorrow. So a lot of great work on this. Make sure that you are checking in on the partnership's website. We have a quick link dedicated to the organizational standards in Roma Next Generation, where we've been posting all of these. Honestly, it changes every couple of days at this point in time, so do make sure that you keep checking back so you can see this recording, the TA guide when it's posted. If you missed any of the TA guides or webinar series on the standards prior to this one, they're all going to be posted there. So with that, I don't see any questions that came in the meantime. Are there any parting words that either Natalie or Jarl would like to leave us with?
No, just wanted to say thanks for joining us here today, and I hope that you find the TA guide helpful and that you log on to our website to access the TA guides for the other organizational standards. So thank you.
Have a
great, and again, and don't hesitate to reach out to us directly if we can answer any questions or otherwise be of help with your work.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.